Yes, hello, and welcome to Release the Creative, your favorite podcast about creativity, cognition, and this week, propaganda, politics, and pageantry.
You love your alliteration.
I do. I think it might be a problem.
Not yet.
I should see someone for it, though, because reading, I went back and I was reading through my own book last week because ego, and the use of alliteration is awesome, but it's evident.
Who do you see for that? A therapist or a language specialist?
Or a neurologist? My brother's a doctor, and he was just explaining to me the difference between a psychiatrist and a neurologist, or a psychiatrist, psychologist, and a neurologist the other day. I'm like, yeah, I don't think I need a psychiatrist. I'm not sad. I need a neurologist. I'm messed up. It's a completely different thing. So today we are talking about, as I said, propaganda, politics, and pageantry. Because today, this podcast won't get posted till next week, but today is January 20th. It is the day of Joe Biden's inauguration.
About 3 hours ago. And all this week, I'm in the Army Reserve, and so for the last couple of weeks, everyone's been hearing about this National Guard unit's being called up, and this is being called up, and this is happening for the inauguration, and this is being happened for the inauguration. And I'm sitting back, and I have questions, and we're first going to ask those questions. And then we're going to just break down just political pageantry. And here are the questions. In a world that has been utterly locked down, completely and entirely, we have been telling people to not go outside and locking down the world. Huge conferences have gone virtual. Huge universities that are hundreds of years old have gone completely virtual. But a parade that can't happen for a swearing in that can constitutionally happen anywhere demanded 20,000 people to come in to control a crowd that wasn't supposed to be there and the entire city to be shut down as far as traffic goes. Why didn't they just have him swear in the Rose Garden and web stream it? Because there's nothing constitutionally that says he can't do that. Well, if you do the inauguration from the Rose Garden, the terrorists win. Is that...
So here's the thing, though. We say that as a joke, but I really think there are people that say that's the answer.
Yeah, well, and I think it is not the terrorists is the joke, but the mentality is the same. It's we have to soldier on. We have to, keep calm and carry on and all of that.
Sure.
We're going to do it like we're supposed to do it. Because if we don't, then we should just give up on everything. I don't know. It's a very binary point of view, but I think that's kind of the answer.
So there's two things I have. That's a good answer, actually. So tradition matters. Absolutely, tradition matters, and we're not going to let a little rain cancel the barbecue. I get that mentality. To the water's edge. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? This is not a joke. I'm dead serious. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Because there actually is an answer to this question.
It's the egg.
It's the egg.
Yes.
And the thing that laid it wasn't a chicken.
Correct.
Right. So we can argue all day about, it doesn't have to be the last time this happened. It's the first time the new version happened. It didn't have to be a smaller deal. It didn't have to be a smaller inauguration. It didn't have to be a less important inauguration. It could have been the first wave of the new way of doing it.
Well, politics are somehow different.
Okay.
Political traditions. You're right. We have taken college online. We've taken our conferences. There's so elementary schools online now. We changed everything. But yeah, there's something about we talked about this a few weeks ago with the certifying the electoral votes
with the pirate chest.
And
I think we're the only ones that call it a pirate chest, by the way. But
yeah, well, it clearly is a pirate chest.
It's true.
And the question is, why is it still a pirate chest? It's not. You could say, oh, well, it has to be paper because of security, digitizing it. There's arguments against digitizing stuff.
Sure,
paper's a real thing, and we need to have a record. And I get all of that, but why pirate chest? And we're going to
find out that chest is from IKEA and was made 2 years ago, and you just don't like the styling.
They used to use Tupperware, and they've gone to pirate chest. Yeah. But yeah, no, all of it is you got the statues and the marble and the gavel.
Absolutely,
Congress could be held in an IKEA. They could do that, but they don't.
And I know that on Instagram Live, one of our viewers right now is in England, which brings me to this. And to that exact same point, they still wear powdered wigs and gowns in
That's the same exact thing. We ditch the wigs, but not the mentality.
Right. We still have gavels. And again, I am all for tradition. I get tradition. Tradition is what unites us and it connects us to our history. Tradition is important. But shutting down a city, activating 20,000 people from their homes to bring them in to do crowd control of crowds that should really not technically be there. Also, you can stand in front of a giant pond and swear in, which constitutionally could have been done in the back of his limo. It shouldn't have been. That is not what I'm advocating here.
Well, I think we have a little bit of a warped view that we live here and we think this is a real city.
Okay.
But this is Disney World. If you're going to throw a parade in Orlando, you do it in Disney World because that's the theme park.
Right.
Downtown D.C. is kind of America's theme park. and so
okay, just so we're clear, the fact that I've never seen that on a t-shirt, on the t-shirt salesman like you walk through D.C. if you've never been here and it's just right off the mall where that's not allowed. It's just t-shirt salesman up and down. Like, I went to D.C., like impeach, blah, 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 whatever. The fact that I've never seen the nation's amusement park or theme park, because it like, welcome to Freedom Land.
I like it, but I don't know who would buy that shirt.
Me. Like, welcome to Independence World.
But yeah, no, it's a little bit of doing the inauguration out in the flurries or the snow or whatever is the same as the noon parade down Main Street at Magic Kingdom.
I so badly want to go, no, you're forgetting. But it is such a well-argued and inherently correct point.
Now, I mean, here's the question. I'm saying we do it like a theme park, but maybe the argument is more theme parks represent the pageantry we have made in real life.
Oh, wow.
That's the point of a theme park. That's the theme.
Well, actually, you know what? This is really interesting because a lot of people don't understand this because when most Americans, and again, I know we have an international audience. Hello, Ori. But like most Americans, when they think of parades, think of the Macy's Day Parade, the noon parade at Disney World. But this actually goes to the very point of this episode, and that's pageantry. The whole concept of a parade was to march your military force down Main Street so people could just see your big swinging dick. That was the entire point. Yeah. It's pageantry. It has no inherent use. It's all psychological. It's all cognition. It's I'm going to march tanks and troops and people down the Main Street, and there will be flags and cheering, but flags and cheering is not the point.
It's the same as a wedding ceremony.
Okay.
So,
very good point.
Even a lot of people have different opinions on how important a wedding itself is.
Sure.
I'm not talking about the government contract. I'm not talking about...
You're not talking about the marriage. You're talking about the wedding.
I'm not talking about if you say a marriage is a bond between you and God. I'm not even talking about that part. I'm talking about the dress and the flowers and the tuxedo and the standing in front of everyone. And that is separate from all the other parts of marriage, because you could get married, you could have a bond with God, you can get health care from the government. You can do all of those things without the dress and the tuxedo and the flowers.
Lots of people do it. They go to City Hall, they spend $50, get a license, they swear.
Right. So the difference between the people who go to City Hall and the people who stand up and dress up in costumes.
Absolutely.
That's the pageantry. And the point of it, I think, is the same, that you are showing your friends and family, hey, I am committing to this person. Now, a lot of people think that's not important.
Sure.
But that's why those people do it. And that's
Absolutely.
The same thing is nobody has to like check the newspaper tomorrow and be like, is Biden president or is that next week? I can't remember. It's like it needs to be a big news story, live TV, it has to be big enough that like you don't forget New Year's Day. When you wake up on January 1st, it's like, oh, it's January 1st. But like, you're like, did the Wonder Woman movie come out on Disney yet or not? It's like, maybe we got to look it up. We got to Google it. You're trying to.
So you're saying that pageantry is a cognitive anchor. It gives you something. It stands out.
It's a hurdle in a race. You got to jump over the hurdle. It makes you jump over the hurdle mentally. And I'm speaking of one who has never much seen the point in pageantry and tradition.
Yeah, I hate it.
But I'm 40 now.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Most of my grandparents died in the last few years.
Yep.
And then COVID hit. So it had gone from Christmas time is big, huge grandparents, all the cousins, all the everything. It had already shrunk to, well, we see this one cousin or that one aunt, or Christmas had shrunk just by nature of people moving and people getting older. And in my family, Christmas had already shrunk. Then COVID hit.
Sure.
And so this year it was a very personal thing. And it definitely went from, I didn't really appreciate the pageantry of Christmas earlier.
Right.
To now it's like, wow, if I don't get the decorations out, there is no Christmas.
The way it should be.
Yes. But I recognize that's,
right.
I stopped taking it for granted. Let me put it that way.
Absolutely. And no, I actually really like that example. It's really fun because I was raised in a house that was kind of anti-pageantry, which is funny because my father loves parades and flag ceremonies. My dad will stop and watch a flag ceremony, and not out of patriotism. It is patriotism, but like he actually truly loves. It could be Boy Scouts, it could be Marines, it could be.
I was going to say, I find it hard to believe someone who rose high up in the Army is not a fan of pageantry, but then you just said he's a fan of that specific kind of pageantry.
Yeah. My dad's, and if this comes off in any way disrespectful, it was misunderstood. My dad's favorite place to when people come to D.C. and they're like, oh, well, I want to see the White House, and I want to see the Capitol, and I want to see the Smithsonian's, and I want to see, and they have this big list, and he's like, well, and Arlington Cemetery, right? And they're like,
I guess.
Sure. My dad loves Arlington Cemetery. My dad would go to Arlington Cemetery before Disney World. I remember once we lost my father at Disney World. This is a real story. We lost, and you're like, we lost little Johnny. No, we lost my father. We lost my father at Disney World, and we couldn't find him. And I found him it was like 45 minutes later, and it turns out that he was wandering Main Street, USA, and there were, I missed it, I didn't see it, but there was like firemen or something doing a flag ceremony. They were like raising a flag because there was something going on, and he saw it, stopped, walked over, and spent 25 minutes while they did this whole present the colors. And instead of going and doing Disney World, he he spent an hour of his Disney World time.
He enjoyed it in a different way.
Watching a flag ceremony done by, I really believe it was firemen for some reason on Main Street, USA. And that was just the highlight of his trip. He loves parades. He loves flag ceremonies. He loves the details of that. And there's nothing in this episode is pageantry good or bad? It's just, why is it? Like, because it isn't necessary. It is by definition pageantry. It is the example that I like the most is if you take a documentarian, if you take someone whose job it is to take pictures of things happening for history, you're like, oh, so glad that person was there with a camera to take pictures of history. But now when the president signs a new bill and like a big deal, it's not there was a cameraman there to capture history. There was a photo shoot for the bill signing. And that is not the same thing.
Yeah, it happens a lot in our business where we are hired to document something, but we're the ones calling the shots.
Right. They're like, so where do you want us to stand? We're like, am I a documentarian or a film director? I can be either, but like, I need to know, which is for the record why I hated working at weddings, because they wanted you to be they wanted to be the direct, like,
yeah, you didn't have the actual control.
they want you to be a filmmaker, but they give you zero control. But
so I want to circle back to Main Street Disneyland or Disney World, either. That to me, I said I was never a big fan of pageantry. What Walt Disney did at Disneyland, to me is, I really admire it. Okay. And I know that your opinion on Disney World, it matches many adults, which is it's a weird fake place. And it is.
I don't know that mine's it's a crowd-ridden like anxiety attack of children, but you know.
Well, that's another layer to it.
Yeah.
But no, there's a lot of people I know that say, well, why would you go to, Epcot Center and see fake Venice when you could go to real Venice? And some of that is classism. We're like, we can't all afford to go to Venice.
No, yeah.
But that aside, they say, well, I'd rather go to St. Augustine, Florida, or Cape Canaveral and see real history instead of go to stupid fake history. And I am sympathetic to that point of view.
Sure.
But what I love, what Walt Disney did, and here's where I think that your appreciation of it would come into, is he was a filmmaker.
He was, yeah.
And
he was a storyteller.
He designed his theme park, before there were theme parks before, but they were not as well planned out. And what he did is he created a live.
Actually, I want to stop you here.
Yeah.
Not to stop, because I want the point you're about to make, which I think I know where you're going with this. I want it to be more. There were not theme parks before. There were amusement parks.
Yes.
And no, that's important. Walt Disney invented the theme park. Before, there was boardwalk parks. They were rickety. They were paint was chipping off. They were gross. They were cotton candy. They were popcorn. They were amusement parks. They were fairs. Walt Disney invented the story park.
Yes, and specifically a movie, which is what he knew how to make.
Right.
And here's where I really admire it. It's not just, you're like, oh, well, of course they have the Guardians of the Galaxy ride now. It's movies, right? It's
right.
Like, I'm not talking about attractions that are themed after specific movies. I'm talking about the entire experience is built to draw you into being the star of a movie. From start to end. And we talked about this a week or two ago when we talked about how Ghostbusters brought you into the world naturally.
Sure.
Think about it. When you go to Disney World, you park your car way the hell out away from everything.
Yeah.
And Disney World does this even better than Disneyland. It's intentional. It's not that we need a big parking lot. They need you to get out of your car, get in a little tram, ride to where you get your tickets, then get on a boat, take the boat. And so by the time you actually get to the theme park,
you are separated from reality.
You've gone on a journey. You have been Frodo hiking across the mountains by the time you get there. Then Main Street funnels you down something that's familiar. It's early 20th century USA. It's the town Walt Disney grew up in. It's not Fantasyland. There's no Tinkerbell. You don't see crazy.
They don't hit you in the face with it. You walk into something that is nostalgic
and familiar, and
so much so that there's the guys. There's some, often depending on the time of day. There's the barbershop quartet out there. There's the guy there's the horse-drawn
the carriage. It's all early America. It's all early
Mimi
Americana.
And St. Louis, yeah.
And the point is like, oh, this is stuff I've experienced in other media. And the windows are the credits. I don't know if you know this, all of the shops,
they're real people.
They're real people that worked on the parks. And so not only like symbolically credits, they're literally credits. These are the people who designed Disneyland. And you're seeing their names as you come in, which is how movies used to be. You would see all the names
the credits
up front.
Were at the beginning, yeah.
And the castle is drawing you down, where that's the fantasy. That's the
and when you hit it,
magic.
That's when it splinters out into Tomorrowland's fantasy.
Tomorrowland's right.
Tomorrowland's right. Yeah.
And so that whole 90-minute process, and it's a 90-minute process to get from your car to I'm immersed in the Disney magic. That's a 90-minute process that if you've ever gone on any kind of, you said you've worked at Disney World, and I'm sure you've been driven in the back and get out of the car and you walk through the gate behind the candy store and you're like, oh, I'm here. It's not the same.
No, I was going to say, nowadays you can do this with Google Maps, but if you go on and you just straight up look at, if you go on and just look at Google Maps, what you just said is very true. That lake, they built it. It wasn't there.
Yeah.
It's the only lake they needed to build in Florida. The place is covered in water, but they could have put the parking lot much like you can at most amusement parks, where you're at the top of the Ferris wheel and you can see your car.
Yeah.
No, if you're at the top of first off, there's no Ferris wheel, but like you can't see reality from anywhere in Disney World. They make sure, Downtown Disney doesn't count, but like they make sure that you're immersed. I love that. I will say one thing. The World Showcase at Epcot is probably one of my favorite places in the world. And I had never realized, I knew why, but it's the same reason. It's what you just said is you get there and you get through Epcot and it's all tomorrow and all this crazy stuff. But you start right there, and depending on if you go left or right, it's either Canada or Mexico, which is strange because America's the other side. But left and right is Canada and Mexico. And it's exactly what you said. It is getting to go to Venice, but you get to walk about a mile around this lake, again, man-made lake, and experience fake but intermittent immersion through this pageantry. But they do a very good job with eye lines to make sure that, if you walk out to the water, you can see the whole World Showcase. But if you are in Japan, you can't see Norway. Like they try to keep you in that moment. To the point. So one of my cousins used to work at Disney in construction management. Mm-hmm. And he was telling me something that I had never thought of. He worked there many, many years ago, and he was there when they were building the new Beauty and the Beast kind of attraction at Disney World.
Yeah.
And they have the castle.
Yeah.
The castle up there.
Up on the
and
mountain.
it's forced perspective. And everyone's like, well, of course it's forced perspective. Like, duh. They spent a lot of money and time figuring where they could put it, that at no point could something break the perspective. Like it's easy to go, okay, well, this tower will be 10% smaller than this tower. So when you look at it, they did a lot of work. They removed some trees. They removed some things. They changed some subtle landscape things so that at nowhere that you are looking at that, oh, and look, there's a billboard behind. They went out of their way to make sure that nothing broke that moment and took that moment away.
Yeah, and that whole process you described is like watching a movie. Like there's so many parallels between the fakery of Disney World and the fakery of Hollywood.
Yeah.
That some people don't like that. To me, that makes Disney World one of the most American places there is.
It's lies from the moment you walk in. It's nothing but sugar, cotton candy, nothing good for you, and straight lies. I agree. The most American thing in the world.
To bring it back around, though, that's the pageantry.
It is.
And it's a different application of it. A lot of the pageantry, we're talking about politics and religion, is to denote, hey, this thing that we're putting the pageantry on matters.
Right.
Pay attention to it. Disney World is the pageantry without the thing that matters, which is...
It's the pageantry for the pageantry's sake.
Yeah, which is an interesting... I mean, and that's what going to the movie theater is, too, really. So it's interesting that that's how our entertainment is that.
So it's interesting. So my parents used to... Make fun of me is not the right word. Used to comment that this was odd. We would be on a trip as a kid, and we would be going somewhere, and we'd go to Universal Studios, or we'd go somewhere and we'd travel for hours, and we'd get in a car and we would travel for hours, and we'd get there and we'd see a thing, and they'd be like, let's go do this, let's go do this. And I was like, oh my gosh, that movie theater looks awesome. Let's go see a movie. And they'd be like, you can see a movie anywhere. The movies we can watch later. And what they didn't realize is I wasn't talking about wanting to see the movie. I mean, I wanted to see the movie, but I love the pageantry of movie theaters because often, and this is less and less true these days, but there's an experientialness to it. You walk in and there's either movie quotes or they've done something to draw you into that world of make-believe, and they do so very intentionally. To bring this back around, this all matters, and it's all very applicable, but this whole concept of experience matters. And I say it in my book, and I've said it on this podcast 100 times. Your brain has no ability of grabbing onto disassociated data. Yeah, I could give you the secret to the universe right now, but if it was in a format that you didn't understand, you wouldn't remember it.
Right.
It wouldn't work. So a lot of times the pageantry has lots less to do with the importance of the thing. It has to do with it's like you said, is today New Year's Eve? It's giving your brain something to connect to. It's giving a touch point. So I wanted to bring up the debates, the presidential debates, to bring it kind of back to politics. Now, again, I'm not talking about anything partisan, but the first debates were between John F. Kennedy and Richard M. Nixon.
First televised.
Is that
what you meant to say?
That is, in fact, what I meant to say. And what's really, really interesting is Nixon would, of course, go on to be president, but John F. Kennedy really, really won those debates. And they say he was the first television president because anyone who listened, as they always had, sat around the radio and listened to the debates, said that Nixon just beat him up one side of the head and down the other, just destroyed him. But when people watched it, oh, that's my president, because he was standing taller. He wasn't an old man with lights under his eyes. He was presidential looking. Whereas Nixon, I mean, if we were going to line up the scariest looking presidents, he's got to be in the top three, and I don't know who the other two would be. I mean, the Cheeto would be up there too.
Yeah, that's a whole podcast right
there. That is.
Let's
Who's the third?
Presidents by scariness.
By scariness, yes. But like, throw a hood on him and he's basically Palpatine. And I'm not saying like he could have been the nicest guy ever. I'm just straight visuals. And that didn't bode well for him on camera.
There's The Simpsons parodied that in a mayor debate where he was sweating under the lights and like he pushes his hair up and it makes like these horns, and then the TV crew like puts fire on the screen. It's like fire maybe simulated or something. Like they really went overboard with it.
Really. And it's but what's so funny about that is, so what started in 1960 as this real, hey, look, we have a television now, let's throw it on TV, and nobody thought much of it. Like, I don't know the answer to this. Was Kennedy and or Nixon wearing makeup? Like, were they powdered down? Right. I don't have an answer for that. I'm sure it's available, but I don't know.
My guess is yes, given that movies had been a thing for a while. TV was new.
That's true.
But movies, I think, would have made the makeup happen. But again,
I don't know.
Either.
If you walk up to, I mean, I bet Kennedy, a New England boy, wouldn't have shirked away from a little powder, but you walk up to a conservative man and say, sir, I'm about to put makeup on you. I know guys, I have worked in our industry in the 2000s that were like, no, you're not. Yeah. Like, I was like, really? Like the first thing on this podcast today was me putting on powder. But my point here is that it went from let's just televise, let's just document this, to now there are month-long debates or negotiations about the format of the debates. Will it be town hall? How long will they have? And a lot of that you're like, well, that's logistical. That's just debating the debate. But no, that is trying to establish which format will have the correct type of pageantry that my candidate can tell the better story. Because it's experiential now. It's just like what you said. Are you going to park your car? And how do I bring them into how can I make my candidate look more presidential? What format gives him the upper hand?
So that's interesting. This year, because of COVID, there was some more, debate over how that would be handled.
Sure.
But it's interesting how narrow, you're right. These are very important debates over how the debates go, but they still don't really go all that far out of the wheelhouse.
Out of the wheelhouse, yeah.
It's like, no, I want one of the debates to be them sitting on a dock sipping lemonade. And, one debate where they're sitting on a city school bus driving around New York City. Like,
I cannot tell you.
Could be interesting.
Richard Gilmore, Masterpiece Theater style, what I would pay to watch the two presidential candidates in red leather wingback chairs in a dark and dusty library, kind of stodgy fight, and having a moderated conversation. I would pay. I can't think of the two candidates I wouldn't have wanted to see that conversation. Moderated, of course, because otherwise it wasn't going to go very well. But you're right. It's always, well, will it be town hall? Will it be at a university? And that then there's the venue plays in.
I love the venue debate because they always come in and dress it exactly the same.
Yeah, they're like, where are we going to make this monumentous thing that we will dress to make it look like it's just could have been anywhere?
It's a convention hall. It looks like a convention hall every time.
Yeah, and so some of that is, and there's so many factors here, we're not going to get to an answer at any point, but some of that is the pageantry because it needs to feel big and important. And others are, why isn't it them sitting in wingback chairs or on a dock drinking lemonade or wearing, standing in a river fly fishing? I would pay to see that too. The reason is because we are terrified of the new. Don't reinvent the wheel. Read my book to understand that was a joke. Don't reinvent the wheel. Let's stay with the familiar. We're so terrified of trying the new because we know what works or we know what has in the past worked. But that's a different conversation. Back to it's just so interesting that we apply significance to things by adding mental weight to them. Oh, I have an army. It has 20,000 people. That's cool. Let me show you what 20,000 people looks like is a very different, That's now pageantry.
Yeah. And no, there's definitely something to be said for, structure, days of the week. It's like, if you have ever been on like early in COVID or like a long snow day or something, is it a Wednesday or Saturday? I don't remember.
Yeah.
And it starts to mess with your head a
little. It really, really does.
And so, yeah, having these sort of anchors, and I guess, is that the definition of tradition, is pageantry that repeats on an annual basis?
Interesting. No, I mean, like
the New Year's Eve ball dropping, we would call that tradition. If it only happened one time, it's not tradition. It's just
a thing you did that one time.
It's a thing we did that one time.
It would be wonderful if that was a thing we only did that once. Would have made so much sense. I still don't. So one of our Instagram live people just commented something I want to include. It says, I find it weird how you have pop stars performing on your inauguration ceremonies. In England, it's just announced that there's a change, and you can see the old prime minister walk out and the new one walk in. Can we start doing that? I mean, there's very little that I'll say like England's doing this right, but like seriously, I wish the inauguration was like a moving van driving away while a new moving van drove out. One guy walked out, the new guy walked up to a Bible, swore in, walked in, we're done.
Social media has kind of done that. I saw lots of photos of the moving vans moving Trump's stuff out.
Did you really?
Yeah, that people post photos of it, and that's not part of the TV broadcast. So like in the past, it was what they put on stage is what's in the newspaper, and then what's on TV. And now, because of social media, it's all shuffled throughout the day.
Multi-channel.
But yeah, I saw that basically.
No, I mean, I think I did not know that.
Well, I think it was someone sang the national anthem. It's not like a actual concert, to my knowledge.
Oh yeah, interesting. I honestly don't know. I think I missed that one entirely. But it's so interesting to me that I see this as an opportunity. I mean, given that we are entering this new, like you said, social media has changed everything. We just ended the Twitter president, and whether or not you loved Trump or not, which whatever. whether you think it's a good thing or not, he was the first president to truly milk Twitter for every ounce it was worth.
I was thinking about that today. I mean, not clearly, but to my mind, Biden's not going to be like on social media.
Yeah, he's going to be a president in the traditional sense of the word.
And it's going to be, 4 to 8 years of Biden. He'll be like 90 years old. Is this the first time, I'm just speculating here, we might jump from a president to one half his age? Like that'll be we've had younger and older. It's gone back and forth generations, but like the next jump might be the biggest.
Sure.
Which why I'm bringing this up is our next president might be the next big social media president.
The next social president will need to be.
Yeah. It's like TV. It's like, well, Kennedy knew television, Nixon didn't, and eventually you couldn't be a president without being good on TV.
Absolutely.
Very quickly. And social media, I think that this is our last non-social media president.
No, I mean, and HD television, same thing with just reading the news. If you look at Walter Cronkite and Brian Williams, there's a stark difference in how much fun it is to look at one of them.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, they're both just very good-looking men, but no, SD black and white television, bad lighting, and they're like, what? He's just reading the news. But as things got HD, makeup and lights, and now you didn't just read the news, you were the news, and to Brian Williams' detriment. So the thing is that in a lot of ways, and I agree with you, I don't think Biden is going to be tweeting out, and in a lot of ways I think that's good, but in a lot of ways that's not good. Like, he needs to hire himself a White House desk person whose job it is to just tweet as him, a lot.
There's going to be White House social media, but it's not going to be Biden social media.
Yeah, and I'm going to say this, as we covered a few weeks ago in our talking about Trump and Twitter. That's the one thing he did remarkably well. And that's sad that because we hate everything about him, that they will throw away the one thing he did remarkably well. And that was connect with his audience in an avenue that they felt connected to, as opposed to standing behind a podium. And that's where I was going with this. My problem with it, my point with it is really, this was an opportunity with the news, the new social media, with the new world, with the pandemic, with everything. It's which came first, the chicken or the egg. I'm not saying we should throw out the inauguration and do something completely different, but whatever that animal was that laid the first chicken egg, it still loved its child, we assume. The chicken, we could have had a new format. We could have done it, but instead we locked the entire city entirely down. We shut down everything. We barred up everything and brought in 20,000 people so that a man could stand by a pool and make an oath that is important, but literally could have been done in an office that would have saved like hundreds of millions of dollars, lots of people time, because it was pageantry. Now, I know we just spent half an hour talking about how pageantry is important, but we didn't need to get rid of the pageantry. But it's back to the debate thing. They only maneuver within this tiny window. This could have been formatted in so many ways that wouldn't have needed it. But we chose the one that displaced the most amount of water. We chose the one that made the biggest splash. And I'm truly curious. I'm not critical. I'm truly curious if that was necessary, if we needed to do that for that benchmark, for that importance, or if we wanted to do that because it's the same thing as marching your troops down Main Street to show how big and long you were swinging.
Yeah, I can see the arguments for both, but clearly nobody ever got fired for repeating last year's plans, so that's maybe a lot of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think, that's kind of where we leave it today. They're questions that propaganda, which we didn't touch on, but all of this is kind of plays into propaganda, pageantry, and politics they're actually cognitive imperatives. People are like, no games. You see it on dating apps. I'm like, I'm not here for games. You're on a dating app. Yes, you are. Like, you cannot like the games, but you just swiped, so game on. Yeah. Like, they are cognitive imperatives. We cling to propaganda. We love politics. And the people that hate the politics the most aren't immune to them. They're just, yeah. So it's a real question that I'd love people to email me about. I'm dead serious at JK, Jeff Kirk,
at releasethecreative.com. Why the pageant? What does pageantry mean? And is it important? And when is pageantry inappropriate? You know, we talked weddings, we talked the debates, we talked Disney World. When is pageantry important? And when is pageantry like inappropriate? And I think that there's a lot to be said for the use of adding weight to something to displace water, or doing it so that it resonates importantly in our brain. And it's that razor's edge, as it often is.
Yeah. I mean, we're almost out of time here, but I would say that the pageantry itself is generally never good or bad. The problem with pageantry is that when we attach it to something, if we attach it to something bad, it gives it longevity. The old, well, why are we doing this way? Well, it's the way we've always done it. And pageantry gives a lot of weight to that argument. And usually we're doing it because it's the way we've always done it is a bad argument. Right. Pageantry really puts gas in that tank, though.
So I will end on this saying that the only thing that you know, with Trump, he was the first president to ever not go to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. He never did, 4 years. He never went. He was the first to do a lot of things. I'm not going to say good or bad. I mean, my political views are not hard to figure out, but like, I'm not, but he did a lot of things new. He did a lot of things different, for good and for ill. The one thing I will say for doing what we did is that Biden needed to show everyone that this was going to be back to some semblance of normality. Yeah. Even with the pandemic, even with it,
hey, remember this?
Remember how it used to be. So with that, I'll say that it was important and it mattered that Biden showed up and he did the best he could in the way that looked the best, the most like it used to be, in a way that people that felt so displaced by the new administration, people that felt so displaced by the new administration, had that touch point and that touchstone to bring them back to, oh, okay, games are over, time to get to work. But there's still a lot to be said by, couldn't that have been done with why it still feels like a very odd choice to have done the way they did it. It felt like an over application of force when this could have been the opportunity, like, no, we're not going to play the games, we're going to get to work. And I honestly don't know which side I fall on, because I can make both arguments very, very well.
As usual, we've learned nothing and decided.
Yes, as usual. It's I will end with this. There was an episode of not Silver Spoons, not Growing Pains. What's the other one? The one that had Michael J. Fox in it.
Family Ties.
Family Ties. Family Ties. There was one where it was because he was the president of the Young Republicans. Right. And he walks in, and he'd been captain of during the election. So he was out campaigning on election day, and he came home and Reagan had just won. It was that episode, and so there's a giant framed picture of Reagan over their mantelpiece, and he comes out. He's like, "Well, sir," and he's talking to a picture. He's like, "Well, sir, we did it. We have the White House, but the Democrats they have the House. But I mean, we have the Senate, but you have the veto. So I mean, if we're careful and we politic hard and we angle it correctly, we can make sure that in the next 4 years, nothing changes."
That's the dream.
And I'm like, that sums up politics really well, actually. Awesome. As always, guys, this is Release the Creative, your favorite show on cognition and creativity. And we look forward to talking to you again next week.
See you then. Thanks for joining us here at Release the Creative. Kirk here would never say it to your face, but he thinks you should like and subscribe to us on YouTube.
And Jeff is far too shy to admit it, but he thinks you should subscribe to us on your favorite podcast reader.
Yeah? Well, you're the one who's always saying that everyone should give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
Why do you have to make everything so difficult?